All right, back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. If you're just joining the show now and weren't able to catch that first segment, I gave you the usual chip shot segment of the day and talked about Antonio Pierce's comments on applying the old Jordan rules to the new, what he's calling the new Patrick Mahomes rules, and how he's gonna try and defend Patrick Mahomes. My reaction to that and what it kind of meant, what I thought it kind of meant going forward for this Raiders team. But now I can jump into the second story that I have for you guys, and that being the situation with Terry Bradshaw and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, mostly the quarterback position of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Currently, Kenny Pickett is the only quarterback under contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mason Rudolph is a free agent, and they just released Mitchell Trubisky. So that just remains as Kenny Pickett as the only quarterback. And he is the current starting quarterback. He was drafted by the Steelers first round in the 20th pick, if my memory serves me right. And, went to Pitt, spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh. He's a New Jersey kid, actually. Grew up in Ocean Township, went to high school in Ocean Township, then he went to Pitt, spent all his 4 years in Pitt, got to know the facilities. And if you didn't know, the University of Pittsburgh shares some of their building facilities with the Pittsburgh Steelers, so he was always in and around the building. He kind of got that nostalgia love at first with the fans. He's a local Pittsburgh kid, and the fans gravitated towards him early, but after some struggles, first 2 years in the league, it has been a lot of ups and downs. He's been injured, different coordinators, trying to get his O-line healthy and just improving overall, trying to get on the same page with his receivers. It has all been a lot. It's been a lot of a whirlwind for Kenny Pickett and the Steelers, and he hasn't produced, like I mentioned, to the highest of standards, and a lot of people are starting to question if he's the guy for the job going forward. And there's a lot of questions around that. A lot of people give their opinions on that. One of them recently was Terry Bradshaw. He was a guest on the Rich Eisen show recently, I think yesterday or 2 days ago. And, Rich asked him about it, what he thought on the whole Kenny Pickett situation. And he said directly, "I love Pickett. I know him well. He's fiercely competitive. He's a tough-minded kid. Things don't bother him. I really like him a lot." He has a close connection with Kenny Pickett. I'm sure they've communicated, talked over the last 2 years. He's gotten to know him, so he's personally on good terms with Kenny Pickett. He believes in him and everything like that. Rich later asked him about the whole Justin Fields trade scenario that it has been all over the sports world media. And Terry Bradshaw gave his honest thoughts. He said, "I say that's a huge mistake. You don't need Fields. Stay with what you've got. Just build him up. Get him another receiver. Get him an explosive tight end. Give him another tackle, another guard. Have the ability to protect him." And I thought those were very interesting words to use. Very interesting suggestions, because it led me down a lot of different ways with this. Just when he says get him another receiver, another explosive tight end, another tackle, another guard. Their O-line isn't great. They drafted a tackle, Broderick Jones. He had a pretty good first season in the NFL. He's a left tackle in my opinion, and they had him over at right tackle most of the year. So I think he can improve if they move him over to the left. They have got new pieces on there. Isaac Seumalo from the Eagles played a great season in my opinion. Definitely a major upgrade for that O-line. James Daniels on the other side, another solid right guard that I don't think allowed a sack this year. The left tackle was Dan Moore. That's an area where I think you can improve. Their center as well, Mason Cole, actually was released today. On my way over here to the studio, I saw the news that he was released. So that is a hole that they need to fill, obviously, but I don't think this entire O-line is is in shambles, but not by any means. They had some great games running the ball, especially, and I think they're starting to switch over to that identity. But this O-line was a big reason for that, and they performed pretty well in some games, held up pretty well against the pass as well in those games. So, the O-line isn't in shambles. Get him another receiver, I guess. Deontay Johnson and George Pickens are they're solid. George Pickens definitely has a higher ceiling, has that freak athletic talent that a lot of people like to point out. And Deontay Johnson is a good route runner. I think he's kind of struggled over these last few years. The constant quarterback switching, offensive coordinator switching, I think has really affected him the most and his production. And, he went a whole season without scoring a single touchdown. And he kind of got on the same page with Pickett, but sometimes, the throws weren't there. They weren't on the same page. And it looked off. Same with George Pickens, where the situation that he was in a lot, he made it a big deal sometimes on the sidelines when he would react in a bad way. His body language seemed down and everything. He wanted the ball more, and it just wasn't going to him. Pat Freiermuth is another good tight end. He had a great year last year, and now this past season wasn't really involved too much, and he got hurt, which played a part in it. But I was very confused as to why he wasn't really getting the targets that I expected. And a lot of it was on Matt Canada. A lot of the story of the year for the Pittsburgh Steelers was Matt Canada. It was heard everywhere, not even in Steelers games. The fire Canada chants. And it got to a point where Mike Tomlin, I think, was forced to do it. It wasn't, I forget how he worded it. It was something along the lines of, it got to a point where Matt Canada, it wasn't good for Matt Canada to always hear that, and he couldn't perform to his ability if he were to stick around with everybody just chanting for him to leave. So Mike Tomlin made that change. A new coordinator came in, Mike Sullivan, and Eddie Faulkner were promoted as co-coordinators, and it worked for the first game against the Bengals. They posted their first 400 total yards game in a long time. I forget exactly the year, but it was like a crazy stat. And then after that, I think Kenny got hurt, and then it kind of all started stuttering. And the flow wasn't really there anymore other than that Bengals game. They struggled a lot. That's when they really switched over to the running game, and now Kenny's in a situation where he didn't finish off the year. It was Mason Rudolph, and the reports have been that some Steelers receivers prefer that Mason Rudolph be signed back again and have a fair shot of it. And, he played great those last few games. Don't get me wrong. He took advantage of the situation. He had nothing really to lose. He was playing with nothing to lose. He went in there. He threw it without really a care, thinking twice about it. And he performed very well. Had big games like against the Bengals again. George Pickens had a monster day. Mason Rudolph had some great numbers, and it was a good win at home, and it actually got them into the playoffs. They played well enough to make it into the tournament, and traveling to Buffalo is always not going to be favorable with a backup quarterback, even a third-string quarterback, which was what Mason was, because they gave more game time to Mitch Trubisky, and he performed the worst out of all three. And now they gave it to Mason. He was able to do something with it. And now, how do you respond to all that? Mason Rudolph finished off the year strong. He's a free agent. And you have Kenny still on the roster, signed to the team. And, kind of just to give it some context, diving more into Kenny's performances. He's gotten hurt both seasons. I think he played 13 or 14 games his first year. And this year he just played 12. In total, in those 2 years, he's thrown 13 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. Again, to give you a bit more of context, Joshua Dobbs, Joe Flacco, Desmond Ridder, and Aiden O'Connell all threw 13 or 12 touchdowns just this past season. If you take a moment to think about that, that's pretty incredible. For a quarterback, again, those are just numbers. You have to dive deeper into it, the context, the O-line, the coordinator, everything. On top of that, I saw some comments made I want to say today, that I saw on ESPN by former quarterback Tim Hasselbeck. He made a good point that I thought was interesting and right to some extent when he said that, Kenny Pickett came in after his full 4 years in college at Pitt. He was familiar with the situation around in and around the building. He knew what the Pittsburgh Steelers meant, what kind of football they played. He didn't come in with this narrative around them that he was supposed to be a developmental project. Get him in a year or two, trying to develop him, and then he's good to go. He came in as like a seasoned college player, and he talked about how his ceiling was low coming in already, and when he came in, he was like 24 years old, and now after 2 seasons gone, he's gonna be 26, and you never saw that jump, that that you or that calmness, that comfortability that you see from a seasoned guy that I think a lot of people thought he could have been. And a lot of people will point to the Steelers jumping the gun a little bit with their quarterback situation. That quarterback class of Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis got hyped up a lot in the combine and leading up to the draft, I think, with some videos that you saw of Malik Willis making some crazy throws, the performances at the combine, and everybody knew that the Steelers needed a quarterback. And the argument could be made that they jumped the gun, and there are legitimate reasons now that I just mentioned with the stats and everything that support that idea. But at the same time now, you're kind of ushering in a new era with Arthur Smith. You get to keep Mike Sullivan, keep Eddie Faulkner on staff, and you brought in a lot of other coordinators to really focus in on certain parts of the offense. I think there's a passing game coordinator, maybe a running game coordinator. I forget just off the top of my head, but the Steelers have a bigger staff now that I think are that'll benefit this team. And on top of all that, they hired someone out of house. That's another thing that the Steelers really struggled with doing. They always promote people from within the organization, from within the staff of the former head coach former coordinator that didn't perform well. And, you can only do that so much and think that things will end up differently. If you're just promoting from within, it's hard for anybody that just got promoted to completely make it a 180 turn and change the style completely to what it used to. It's almost unlikely that they're going to do that. It's going to be some iteration of what you've already been doing. So hiring Arthur Smith, bringing in someone from the outside that didn't have the best of success in Atlanta as a head coach. They were pretty underwhelming, and a lot of it was made that he didn't throw to his weapons, he didn't use them right. But I think that I believe truly that some coaches are way better as coordinators focusing in on one area of the game of football than they are as a head coach where they have a multitude of different responsibilities on a team, trying to keep everybody happy and stuff like that. Arthur Smith is clearly one of those coaches. I think he strives better, performs better as an offensive coordinator. Just looking at his time back as the Tennessee Titans coordinator, he had a lot of success with Derrick Henry, establishing the run game, and with two great backs like Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, I think he could do very well with those two. Trying to rebuild the O-line is always going to be a process. I expect them to address that, and they probably will in the draft or free agency. And that all just helps the quarterback alleviate them a little bit better. Ryan Tannehill isn't a household name to a lot of fans, but in the time that Arthur Smith was there, he had arguably the best years of his career. He was, I forget what categories he led the NFL, but he was up there and performing a lot better than a lot of people would give him credit to. Performed pretty decent in the playoffs with Arthur Smith as well. And I just think it could all kind of restart here, and the Steelers have an opportunity now to start fresh with these recent hires and trying to build this offense finally, because they have a lot of talent, and I think it would be a huge waste if they weren't to take some action and do something about their quarterback situation now, sooner rather than later, because of the pieces that they have, the defense especially that they have. Cam Hayward's not getting any younger. TJ Watt is, I think, going to be 29, 30-ish in the next season or two. So you got to really jump on this opportunity now and seize the moment, because this period of dancing around the playoffs could go away in a positive way and in a bad way. You could jump on it and be a playoff contender for a few years now with a good quarterback, or it could go really bad and you lose those defensive stars and you still have no quarterback, and then you're really trailing the pack and you have no presumable light at the end of the tunnel if it all goes bad. But we'll see. I think Kenny Pickett does deserve a chance to prove himself again with somebody new coming in, new ideas, fresh faces around. So he'll get the opportunity, certainly, but I think it's vital for them to find some competition. It doesn't even have to be Fields. A lot of rumors have been made about Russell Wilson. They could bring in Ryan Tannehill if they really want to. A lot of Jimmy G reports that have been surfacing recently, or address someone in the draft is an option, but I don't think it's likely. If you're going to go in the later rounds, you might as well get someone that's played in the NFL. So I expect him to do that. Justin Fields will always be there and will probably still be in the news going forward, but it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out with free agency starting to pick up a little bit more, teams starting to make moves. One of those moves could be Saquon Barkley, potentially going to a new team. It's unlikely that he'll sign with the Giants, and he's been active on social media, and that has led people to think that he's potentially signing with one specific team. And could it be possible? I would love it to be. I will talk to you guys more about that after I send it to a quick break. On the other side, I'll break it down a little bit more and give you some more specifics as to what Saquon's been doing and who that team could be that he's become very active in following over the last few days. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with two more stories after the break.